In the silence between heartbeats, there are stories waiting to be heard, not in words, but in the language of souls that have weathered storms together. What does it mean to truly see another being, to recognize the wounds hidden beneath the surface? There are ghosts that follow us from battlefields, memories that flash like lightning across dark skies, scars visible and invisible that mark survivors. But what happens when two broken spirits find each other in the rain? When eyes meet across species and somehow impossibly understand? Some connections transcend explanation. Some healings begin not with medicine, but with recognition. This is a story of echoes of trauma, of courage, of the quiet spaces between words where true understanding lives. Of a horse that wasn't just a horse and a woman who had forgotten how to be anything but a soldier. Listen closely. The call of dawn is about to break the longest night. The desert wind carried ghosts. Echo knew this. Not in words, not in thoughts as humans understood them, but in the primal knowing that lived in his bones. In his dreams, the ghosts returned, with the wind bringing fragments of a life that no longer existed. Sand, heat, the thrum of helicopter blades cutting through air. He could still hear the little girl's voice high and clear, like a silver bell calling a name that wasn't his. Small fingers tangled in his mane as they pulled her away, rope biting into his neck as they led him in the opposite direction. The explosion came next, always the explosion. The little girl vanished in a blinding flash, her scent soap and sunshine, and something sweet gone in an instant, replaced by smoke and blood and chaos. Echo's eyes snapped open. The desert was gone, replaced by a storm-drenched Texas hillside. Rain pelted his wounded flank, mixing with blood from a gash that stretched from shoulder to hip. Lightning fractured the sky, and for a moment the thunder became the echo of that long-ago explosion. He stumbled forward, guided by instinct rather than purpose, finding himself near a swollen creek where water rushed angrily over stones. The metallic scent of his own blood mingled with the sharp tang of ozone. A different scent caught his attention. Human, female, in distress. Through the curtain of rain, Echo saw her, a woman kneeling at the creek's edge, her body doubled over as if in pain. But Echo recognized a different kind of agony. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. Her hands clawed at the mud. Her eyes stared unseeing at horrors invisible to anyone but her. The woman was drowning on dry land, just as Echo had seen soldiers do after the explosion stopped. But the war continued inside their minds. Something familiar in her terror called to him. Echo did not flee. Instead, he stood, rain streaming down his dark coat, watching the woman battle demons that lived in memory. Sarah McKenna hadn't meant to end up at the creek. She'd only stepped outside to secure the barn door before the storm hit. But the first roll of thunder had paralyzed her. The second had sent her running not toward the safety of the house, but away from it, away from everything, until her legs gave out by the water's edge. The thunder had become mortar fire. The rain was blood washing over her hands. The lightning transformed into muzzle flashes. She was back in Afghanistan, kneeling beside a soldier, with half his chest missing her hands inside his. Wounds his eyes locked on hers, as the light behind them flickered and died. "I can't," she gasped for air. "I can't." Sarah pressed her forehead against the mud, willing the flashback to release her. Something shifted in her peripheral vision, something large and dark. She forced herself to focus, expecting to see a fallen tree or debris from the storm. Instead, she found herself staring into the eyes of a horse. Not just any horse. An akal teke, with a coat so black it seemed to absorb the darkness around it. Despite the rain and wind, it stood perfectly still, regarding her with an intensity that momentarily shocked Sarah out of her panic. "Go on," she whispered. "Get out of here." The horse didn't move. Blood streaked its rain-soaked flank. Sarah's training took over, pushing the flashback aside. "You're hurt." Slowly, she rose to her feet, expecting the animal to bolt. It didn't. It watched her with eyes that reflected lightning, but showed no fear, only a strange, penetrating awareness. "Okay," Sarah said softly. "Let's get you somewhere dry, and I'll take a look at that wound." The horse allowed her to approach and place a gentle hand on its neck. Something about its calm amid the chaos steadied Sarah's breathing. The thunder still rolled, but it was just thunder now, not the echo of war. And Meshuin. Maya Reeves watched from the farmhouse window as her grandmother led a horse through the storm. At 15, Maya had learned to expect the unexpected from Sarah, but this was something new. Another stray, she murmured to herself, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. The old farmhouse creaked around her, protesting against the wind. Horizon Ranch had been in Sarah's family for generations, but it had seen better days. The paint peeled. The roof leaked. The bank was 3 months away from foreclosure. Maya had come to live here 2 years ago after her mother, Sarah's only daughter, died in a car accident. Neither of them had recovered. Sarah retreated into silence and nightmares, Maya into books and solitude. They orbited each other like moons around a dead planet connected by gravity, but nothing more. Now Sarah was bringing home a wounded horse in the middle of a storm. By the time Maya reached the barn, Sarah had the animal in an empty stall and was examining its injured flank by lantern light. "What happened?" Maya asked, keeping her distance. "Found him by the creek. Someone or something got him good." Sarah's voice was steady, focused. This was the only time she seemed fully present when there was something to fix, to heal. "Another mouth we can't feed," Maya said, then immediately regretted the words. Sarah didn't respond. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound. Her face set in lines of concentration Maya recognized from the few photographs she'd seen of her grandmother in uniform. Sergeant Sarah McKenna, combat medic, awarded the Bronze Star for valor under fire. The horse watched Sarah work its ears, alert, muscles tense but not panicked. Maya noticed a small scar behind its left ear, a patch of white hair against the midnight coat. "He's not a wild Mustang," Sarah said. "Too well bred. Akalteke, I think. Someone's prize that either got loose or was abandoned." Maya stepped closer. "He needs a name." Sarah glanced up, surprised. Maya rarely showed interest in anything around the ranch. "Since when do you name strays?" Sarah asked. "Since you started bringing home the ones that match your nightmares." Sarah's hand stilled. The horse shifted, turning its head to look directly at Maya, as if it understood the weight of her words. "Echo," Maya said suddenly. "His name is Echo." "Why Echo?" Maya moved closer, still studying the horse's eyes. "Because he looks like he's heard everything and is just waiting for someone to hear him back." 3 days passed. The storm cleared. Echo's wound began to heal under Sarah's care. Maya spent hours observing him from the barn loft, notebook in hand. She recorded everything: how he ate, how he moved, how he reacted to sounds. Most of all, she noted how he watched Sarah when she thought no one was looking. "He's different," she told Sarah over dinner. "He doesn't act like other horses." Sarah pushed food around her plate. "How would you know? You avoid the stables like they're on fire. I've been watching him. He doesn't sleep much, and he keeps looking toward the Bishop property." Alexander Bishop owned the Sovereign Estates, the largest horse ranch in the county, and developer of the luxury housing complex, threatening to swallow what remained of the small family farms in the area, including Horizon. "Imagination," Sarah muttered. "Maybe," Maya conceded. "But that horse knows something we don't." That night, Sarah woke gasping from a nightmare. The desert, the blood, the faces of those she couldn't save. She stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face, avoiding her reflection in the mirror. When the panic subsided, she pulled on a robe and headed downstairs, seeking the numbing comfort of late-night television. A sound from the barn stopped her. A whinny, not of distress but of recognition. Sarah changed direction, crossing the yard to the barn. Inside, Echo stood at his stall door, head-high, eyes gleaming in the darkness. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Echo tossed his head, then turned to face the window that looked out toward the Bishop property. A vehicle's headlights cut through the night, moving along the boundary road between the two properties. Sarah's pulse quickened. No one drove that road at night unless they were up to no good. Echo pawed the ground, nostrils flaring. "You're right," Sarah said. "Something's not right." She moved to the window, watching as the vehicle, a black SUV, stopped at the old fence line. Two figures emerged, examining something near a survey marker. Bradley Curtis. Sarah recognized the bank manager's silhouette. And Bishop himself. In the dim moonlight, she could see them gesturing toward Horizon Ranch. Planning. Plotting. Echo's soft nicker drew her attention back to him. His eyes held something Sarah hesitated to name as understanding, but couldn't define as anything else. "They're coming for the land," she told him, "and there's nothing I can do about it." Echo snorted as if in disagreement. The next morning, a glossy invitation arrived in the mail. The Sovereign Estates Annual Equestrian Showcase, it read. Prize money $50,000, enough to save the ranch for a while. It's a joke, Sarah said, tossing the invitation on the kitchen table. They send one every year to rub it in. Maya picked it up, studying the embossed lettering. What if it's not? What if we entered? Sarah laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. With what horse? On what budget, against professional trainers and thoroughbreds worth more than this entire property? We have Echo. A stray with a healing gash down his side. Be serious, Maya. I am being serious. He's not just any stray. You said it yourself, he's an Ajalteque. They're rare. Special. Sarah shook her head. Even if he were in condition to compete, which he's not, we don't know anything about him. He could be untrainable. When and we could be homeless in 3 months if the bank forecloses, Maya countered. What do we have to lose? Before Sarah could respond, the sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. Through the window, she saw a sleek black Cadillac pull up to the house. Alexander Bishop himself, not bothering to send an underling. Stay inside, Sarah told Maya, heading for the door. Bishop emerged from his car like a man stepping onto a stage, dressed in an expensive suit despite the Texas heat, his silver hair immaculately styled. At 65, he commanded attention without effort, a man accustomed to respect and obedience. Ms. McKenna, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Lovely morning. What do you want, Bishop? Sarah remained on the porch, arms crossed. Just checking in on my investment. He replied, gesturing toward the weathered farmhouse. The bank informs me you're behind on payments again. The bank shouldn't be discussing my business with you. Oh, but it is my business. When you default, his emphasis on when, not if, made Sarah's jaw clench. I'll be acquiring this parcel to complete the Sovereign Hills development. Call it neighborly interest. Sarah's fingernails dug into her palms. Is that all? Actually, no. His smile widened. I noticed you received our invitation. The showcase is quite an event. You should attend as a spectator, of course. See what real horsemanship looks like. From inside the barn came a sound, a single sharp whinny. Bishop's attention shifted, his smile faltering. You have a horse? He asked, taking a step toward the barn. Just a stray I'm nursing back to health, Sarah said, moving to block his path. A stray? Bishop's eyes narrowed. May I see it? No, Sarah said firmly. He's easily startled. Inside the barn, Echo whinnied again, louder this time. Something in the sound, a challenge and alarm, raised the hair on Sarah's arms. Bishop stepped around her, striding toward the barn with the confidence of a man used to ignoring boundaries. Sarah followed, cursing under her breath. By the time she caught up, Bishop stood frozen in the barn doorway, staring at Echo. The horse had positioned himself at the front of his stall, head-high, ears pinned back in unmistakable recognition and hostility. Where did you get this horse? Bishop's voice had lost its smugness, replaced by something Sarah couldn't quite identify. Shock, fear. I told you, he found me. Impossible. Bishop's face had drained of color. That horse shouldn't be here. Echo struck the stall door with his hoof, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet barn. Bishop flinched. You know him, Sarah said, realization dawning. How do you know my horse? That is not your horse. Bishop snapped, backing toward the door. That animal is dangerous and should be destroyed. Echo's reaction was immediate and chilling. He reared, striking the stall door again with such force that the wood cracked. His eyes, fixed on Bishop, contained a fury that seemed almost human in its intensity. Bishop retreated further, his composure shattered. Get rid of it, he said. If you have any sense of self-preservation, you'll put that animal down today. He turned and strode back to his car, his earlier confidence replaced by rigid haste. As he drove away, dust billowing behind his Cadillac, Sarah turned to Echo. The horse had calmed, but his eyes remained fixed on the departing vehicle, tracking it until it disappeared from sight. What was that about? She asked softly. Echo turned to her, his gaze softening, but still intense. In that moment, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Maya, she called, returning to the house. Get that invitation. We're entering the showcase. Really? Maya appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with surprise. Yes, Sarah said, watching Bishop's car disappear down the road. and we're going to win. But you said, I know what I said, but that was before I saw Alexander Bishop look at Echo like he'd seen a ghost. Sarah's voice hardened with resolve. There's something he's not telling us. Something about Echo. So we're going to find out what it is. Sarah nodded slowly. And we're going to use his own showcase to do it. Dr. James Foster wasn't what Sarah expected. The new veterinarian in Clearwater was younger than she'd anticipated, mid-30s at most, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd agreed to examine Echo on short notice, intrigued by Sarah's description of the horse's unusual behavior. Combat medic, huh? He said as he prepared his examination kit. My father was a medic, William Foster, 7th Group Special Forces. Sarah stilled. Will Foster, I knew him. Afghanistan, 2010. James smiled. He spoke highly of you. Said you had the steadiest hands in the unit. Sarah looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. Your father was a good man. Still is. Retired now. James approached Echo's stall cautiously. So this is our mystery patient. Echo stood quietly watching the newcomer with alert interest rather than fear. He doesn't normally take to strangers, Sarah warned. Let's see. James opened the stall door slowly, speaking in a calm, even tone. Hey there, big guy. Just going to take a look at you. To Sarah's surprise, Echo allowed the veterinarian to approach, only flinching slightly when James touched his healing wound. Someone did a good job cleaning this, James commented. Your handiwork, Sarah nodded. Field medicine isn't so different from veterinary care sometimes. I can see that. He ran his hands along Echo's neck, checking lymph nodes. He's in remarkable condition for a stray. A Calteke, definitely. Rare in these parts. That's what I thought. James moved his examination to Echo's head, gently checking eyes and ears. His fingers paused behind the left ear, where the small scar marked the black coat. Interesting, he murmured. What is it? There's something under the skin here, he said. Small. Could be shrapnel, but it feels too regular for that. Sarah moved closer. A microchip. Possibly. I have a scanner in my truck. Mind if I check? While James retrieved his scanner, Maya appeared at the barn door. Is he okay? Seems to be, Sarah replied. Dr. Foster's just being thorough. James returned with a handheld scanner, passing it carefully over the area behind Echo's ear. The device beeped faintly. Well, I'll be damned, James murmured. There is a chip. Old model, though, and the data's corrupted. I'm only getting a partial read. Sweet, what does it say? Maya stepped closer, her curiosity overcoming her usual reserve. James squinted at the small screen. Just a code fragment. Cent 11. Mean anything to you? Sarah shook her head. Could be anything. Sentinel, sentient sentence. Or sent, Maya said quietly, as in dispatched. Delivery. Cent 11 could be the 11th delivery or shipment of something. Sarah and James exchanged a look. Smart kid, James said. Maya shrugged. I read a lot. James completed his examination, pronouncing Echo healthy, despite the healing wound. Whatever happened to him, he's recovered well. Physically, at least. What does that mean? Sarah asked. James hesitated. It's just, I've worked with horses most of my life, and I've never seen one quite like this. The way he watches, the way he reacts. It's almost like what? Like he understands more than he should. James packed his equipment. Horses are intelligent animals, but this one, there's something different about his eyes. After he left promising to research the chip code, Sarah found Maya in the hayloft laptop open beside her. You should be doing your online classes, Sarah said. I am, Maya replied, not looking up. Biology. I'm studying specialized breeding in equines. Sarah glanced at the screen. Maya wasn't lying exactly. The page displayed an article about selective breeding in horses, but the search bar showed recent queries. Sentinel, program horses, military animal training, equine PTSD response training. Something you want to tell me? Sarah asked. Maya sighed, closing the laptop. I think Echo was part of a military program. Based on a fragment of a code. Based on everything. The chip, his behavior, the way he reacts to your nightmares. Sarah stiffened. What are you talking about? Jut, I've seen him, Grandma. At night, when you have your bad dreams, he gets restless. Like he knows. You've been spying on me. No, Maya said quickly. I couldn't sleep one night and went to check on Echo. You were having a nightmare. I could hear you through the window. He was pacing, agitated. When I looked in on you, you were thrashing around, stuck in a dream. When I came back to the barn, Echo was standing at attention, like he was listening for something. Then you woke up and he immediately calmed down. Sarah wanted to dismiss it as coincidence, as a teenager's overactive imagination. But she thought of Echo's eyes tracking Bishop, of the fear in Bishop's face. We need to know more before the showcase, she said finally. If Echo was part of something Bishop was involved in, we need to understand what we're dealing with. So we're still entering. Sarah nodded slowly. We're entering, and we're going to win. Hernand, she looked toward Echo's stall where the horse stood, watching them, ears forward, listening. Always listening. But first, she said, we need to train. Training began at dawn the next day. Sarah hadn't worked with horses in years, not since before her deployments, but the old skills came back quickly. Echo proved to be a quick study, almost too quick. He responded to commands before Sarah fully gave them, anticipating her intentions. He moved with fluid grace, his movements so precisely matched to Sarah's body language that it seemed they communicated without signal or sound. Maya recorded everything from the fence, documenting each moment of synchronicity between woman and horse. It's like he's reading your mind, she said during a water break. Sarah wiped sweat from her brow. No, he's reading my body, anticipating based on micro movements. Horses do that. Not like this, Maya insisted. Normal horses don't pick up complex sequences after seeing them once. Sarah couldn't argue. Echo's abilities defied conventional explanation. By the end of the first week, he'd mastered routines that should have taken months to perfect. But it was the moments between training sessions that truly unsettled Sarah. Echo's stall faced the house. At night, Sarah would wake from nightmares to find him watching her window, standing motionless in the moonlight. Once during a particularly bad episode where she'd woken up screaming, she'd gone to the barn to find him pacing, anxiously calming, only when she approached. It's okay, she'd whispered, pressing her forehead against his neck. Just ghosts. Echo had exhaled softly, his breath warm against her arm, and for a brief moment Sarah felt understood in a way she hadn't since returning from war. News of their showcase entry spread quickly through Clearwater. Most dismissed it as desperate folly, but a few townsfolk came to watch their practice sessions, curious about the strange black horse and the reclusive veteran who'd suddenly decided to challenge the wealthiest man in the county. 2 weeks before the showcase, David Bishop, Alexander's son, appeared at the fence line during a training session. Unlike his father, David carried himself with an air of uncertainty, his expensive riding clothes seeming to sit uncomfortably on his lanky frame. Impressive, he called as Sarah and Echo completed a complex figure-8 pattern. Where did you find him? Sarah dismounted, eyeing the younger Bishop warily. He found me. David approached the fence, his attention fixed on Echo. My father says you should withdraw from the showcase. I bet he does. He says that horse is dangerous. Sarah snorted. The only danger is to his ego. David's eyes narrowed. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Then explain it to me. I can't. His voice dropped. But I'm warning you. There are things about that horse. Things you don't know. Like what? David glanced over his shoulder as if afraid of being overheard, despite the empty fields around them. My father received a shipment of horses several years ago. Military contract. Special breeding program. They were different. Different how? Trained to do things normal horses can't. Respond to stimuli in ways that shouldn't be possible. He looked at Echo with a mixture of fear and fascination. The program was called Sentinel. Sarah's pulse quickened. And what happened to these horses? There was an accident during transport. All the horses were lost. His eyes locked on Echo. Or so we were told. You think Echo was one of them? It wasn't a question, but David nodded anyway. I think he's Cent 11, the 11th Sentinel, the one they never found. Who's they? I don't know. Military research team. My father never shared details. He stepped back from the fence. All I know is he collected the insurance money for 13 dead horses, and he'll do anything to make sure they stay dead in the official record. Including sabotage. David's silence was answer enough. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked. Because that horse deserves better than what happened to the others. He turned to leave, then paused. Watch your back, Ms. McKenna. My father doesn't lose gracefully. As David walked away, Echo moved to stand beside Sarah, his eyes tracking the young man until he disappeared from view. What did they do to you? Sarah whispered, placing a hand on Echo's neck. The horse turned to look at her eyes, reflecting a depth of awareness that no longer seemed impossible to believe. Later that night, Sarah found Maya in her room surrounded by printouts and notebook pages covered in scribbles. I found something, Maya said without preamble. About Sentinel. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. Tell me, it wasn't just a breeding program. It was a military research project developing horses for therapeutic support of soldiers with PTSD. Maya held up a blurry photograph of a black horse with a soldier. They were specifically training horses to detect physiological signs of panic attacks and flashbacks before they happen. And how did you find this? Deep Web searches military forums. Most of it's redacted or deleted, but there are breadcrumbs if you know where to look. She handed Sarah a printed article with most of the text blacked out. The horses were bred for intelligence and empathy, then trained to become emotional mirrors for traumatized soldiers. Sarah stared at the photograph. Mirrors. They were supposed to reflect the emotional state of their handler, providing feedback that helped the soldier recognize when they were spiraling. Maya's eyes shone with excitement. One forum post claimed they could anticipate a flashback up to 2 minutes before the person even knew it was coming. Sarah thought of Echo standing at attention when her nightmares began, of the way he'd calmed her when panic clawed at her throat. If Bishop was contracted to house these horses, she said slowly, and instead he reported them dead and collected insurance money. Then he committed fraud, Maya finished, against the government. But why, Sarah wondered. What would make it worth the risk? Maya shrugged. Money, or maybe the horses weren't what the military wanted. Maybe they were too good. Too good. What if they didn't just mirror emotions? What if they actually absorbed them somehow? Maya's voice had the breathless quality it got when she was piecing together a theory. There's this concept in psychology called emotional contagion, where one being's emotions directly influence another's. What if these horses were bred to be so sensitive they could take on the handler's trauma? That's impossible. Is it? Maya challenged. How do you explain Echo knowing when you're having nightmares? How do you explain his reaction to Bishop? Sarah had no answer. The sound of tires on gravel drew their attention to the window. James Foster's truck pulled into the yard, headlights illuminating the gathering dusk. Did you call him? Maya asked. Sarah shook her head, already moving toward the stairs. Outside, James approached with an urgency that set alarm bells ringing in Sarah's mind. You need to see this, he said without greeting, holding out a folder. I did some digging into that chip code. Sarah opened the folder to find documents heavily redacted, but still readable in parts. What am I looking at? Records from a joint military-civilian research initiative. Project Sentinel. James's voice was tight. They were breeding horses with enhanced empathic capabilities for PTSD therapy. We just figured that part out, Sarah said. What else? The program was shut down after certain anomalies emerged in the test subjects. James pointed to a paragraph near the bottom of one page. Some of the horses developed what the researchers called mirroring syndrome. They began experiencing symptoms of PTSD themselves. Nightmares, hypervigilance, startle responses. Horses with PTSD. Sarah couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Not exactly. More like they absorbed the emotional states of their handlers. James took a deep breath. Sarah, these horses were more than just therapy animals. They were empathic sponges designed to draw out trauma by experiencing it themselves. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. And Echo, Cent 11 was the most successful of the program, James confirmed. According to these notes, he demonstrated unprecedented ability to connect with severely traumatized soldiers. But then something happened during the final testing phase, an incident with a child. A child! Sarah's mind flashed to Echo's reaction when Maya first approached him, cautious, almost reverent. The daughter of one of the researchers. There was an explosion at the testing facility. The details are redacted, but whatever happened, Cent 11 was scheduled for termination afterward. They were going to kill him. Sarah's hands tightened on the folder. The military pulled funding and ordered all the horses destroyed. But instead they were shipped to a private contractor for disposal, Alexander Bishop, who reported them dead, collected insurance, and did what with them? James shook his head. I don't know, but if Echo is Cent 11 and he's here, then the others might still be alive too, Sarah finished. In the barn, Echo whinnied a sound of warning that cut through the night. All three of them turned to see headlights approaching, moving too fast for safety on the rural road. Bishop, Sarah said, already moving toward the barn. He knows we've been asking questions. We need to leave, James said, following her. If he figures out what we know. No, Sarah's voice hardened. I'm done running. If Echo was part of something, if Bishop did something to the other horses, then we expose him, Maya said, determination flashing in her eyes. At the showcase, in front of everyone, the approaching vehicle slowed, then turned down the main road instead of their driveway. A false alarm this time. Sarah looked at Echo, standing alert, in his stall eyes fixed on her. In them, she saw something she recognized from her own mirror, the haunted awareness of a survivor. 1 week until the showcase, she said. We need to be ready. Echo nickered softly as if in agreement. In that moment, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling over her. Not just for the ranch or for Maya's future, but for the silent partnership forming between her and this extraordinary animal who carried secrets in his veins and ghosts in his eyes. We'll be ready, she promised both to Echo and to herself, and we'll make them see what they tried to bury. The storm that had brought Echo to her had been just the beginning. The real tempest was gathering on the horizon, building toward a reckoning that would change everything. Dawn painted the eastern sky in watercolors of amber and rose, the first light spilling across Horizon Ranch like liquid gold. In the quiet hours before full morning, Maya crept into the barn, a small camera in hand. She'd spent 3 nights setting up her observation, hiding motion-activated cameras in the rafters, determined to document what she'd glimpsed, but couldn't prove. The footage she'd collected had kept her awake until nearly morning, reviewing and re-reviewing what the cameras had captured. Echo didn't sleep, not like normal horses. Instead, he stood sentinel through the darkest hours, his ears constantly moving, tracking sounds too faint for human hearing. Every night, like clockwork, he would leave his position at the front of his stall and move to the back corner, the spot closest to the farmhouse, closest to Sarah's bedroom window. And there he would stand perfectly still for hours. Maya settled onto a hay bale, starting a new recording on her phone. Day 4 of observation, she whispered. Subject continues to display non-standard equine behavior, particularly during nighttime hours. As if on cue, Echo turned his head toward her, acknowledging her presence without surprise. He always knows when he's being watched. Maya continued, focusing the camera on his eyes. Unlike other horses, his pupils don't dilate normally in response to light changes. They respond to emotional stimuli instead. She approached the stall slowly. Echo watched, her ears forward, body relaxed but attentive. I know what you're doing at night, she told him softly. You're listening for her nightmares, aren't you? Echo blinked once slowly, the gesture almost human in its deliberation. Can you really feel what she feels? Maya asked. The fear of the memories. Echo nickered softly, lowering his head to her eye level. Maya cautiously extended her hand, allowing him to catch her scent. Unlike his usual wariness with strangers, Echo pressed his muzzle gently against her palm. The contact sent a peculiar sensation up Maya's arm, not unpleasant but strange, like the static electricity of a storm building. She gasped and pulled back. Echo regarded her with what could only be described as patience. What are you? She whispered. The barn door creaked open, sunlight slanting across the straw-covered floor. Sarah entered, dressed for training in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Talking to horses now? Sarah asked, her voice gruff but not unkind. Maya tucked her phone away. Just documenting, Sarah nodded toward the camera in the rafters. And those research. Find anything interesting? Maya hesitated, unsure how much to share. He stands by your window at night. Something flickered in Sarah's eyes, recognition perhaps, or confirmation of a suspicion. I know, she said quietly. I've seen him. He makes a sound when you have nightmares. 3 short whinnies, exactly the same each time. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her shoulders tensed slightly. Maya, he's trying to wake you up, Maya continued, or trying to pull you out of it somehow. Horses don't. He's not just a horse, Grandma. She are. Maya's voice took on an urgency she couldn't suppress. You know he's not. You felt it too. Sarah moved past her to Echo's stall. The horse greeted her with a gentle nudge, his focus immediately and completely on her. She placed her hand on his neck, and the touch seemed to steady them both. Sometimes, Sarah said, her voice so quiet Maya had to strain to hear it, when the dreams are bad, when I'm back there, it's like he's standing beside me. Not physically, but I can feel him, waiting for me to come back. The mirroring syndrome, Maya said. What if it goes both ways? What if he doesn't just feel what you feel? What if he can make you feel what he feels too? Sarah's hand stilled on Echo's neck. That's not possible. Isn't it? When have you slept better, since Afghanistan, before Echo, or after? Sarah didn't answer, but she didn't have to. The dark circles under her eyes had lightened in recent weeks. The midnight pacing had decreased. The screams that used to wake Maya from her own sleep had become less frequent. We have 5 days until the showcase, Sarah said, changing the subject. Let's make them count. The morning unfolded in a seamless dance of woman and horse moving as one. Echo responded to Sarah's slightest cue, anticipating each command before it was fully expressed. Together, they practiced the routine. They developed a sequence that showcased Echo's intelligence and grace, rather than flashy tricks. Maya recorded each movement, each transition, creating a visual diary of their progress. Occasionally, people from town would park along the fence line to watch, drawn by rumors of the strange black horse and the reclusive veteran who seemed to communicate without words. They're calling you the horse whisperer. In town, James Foster remarked, arriving near midday with supplements for Echo. Your fan club is growing. Sarah wiped sweat from her brow. We don't need fans. We need answers. I might have a few more of those. James pulled a folded document from his pocket. I found a former Army veterinarian who worked on Project Sentinel. He's unwilling to go on record, but he confirmed our suspicions. The horses were engineered for empathic response, bred and trained to connect with humans on a neurological level. Engineered how? Sarah asked, taking the paper. Selective breeding for certain neurotransmitter responses, then intensive conditioning with traumatized soldiers. James lowered his voice. He said Scent 11 Echo was the most successful subject, maybe too successful. What does that mean? The connection became two-way. Not only could Echo detect and respond to human distress, but he could project emotional states back to his handler, calm in the midst of panic, focus during disorientation. James glanced at Echo, who was watching them intently. They called it emotional stabilization. Maya's eyes widened, like a living anti-anxiety medication. More powerful than any drug, James agreed. Imagine a therapy animal that could actually calm your nervous system directly without medication. The military implications were enormous. But something went wrong, Sarah said, remembering the redacted incident report. James nodded grimly. A catastrophic test failure. The details are classified, but my contact said a researcher's child was involved, and after that, the program was immediately terminated. Echo snorted, pawing at the ground. His eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. He remembers, she murmured. That's not, James began, then stopped himself. Actually, I don't know what's possible anymore. These horses were something new, something we don't fully understand. Sarah approached Echo slowly, placing a hand on his forehead. What happened to you? She whispered. What did they make you do? Echo's eyes closed briefly at her touch, and Sarah felt a wave of something pass through her. Not a thought or an image, but an emotion. Regret. Profound, soul-deep regret. She gasped, stumbling backward. What is it? James moved to steady her. Nothing, Sarah said quickly. Just got lightheaded for a moment. But it wasn't nothing. It was confirmation of everything Maya had suggested, everything the documents hinted at. Echo wasn't just sensing her emotions, he was sharing his own. We need to find out what Bishop did with the other horses, she said, changing the subject. If they were as valuable as you say, he wouldn't have destroyed them. My contact mentioned a private research facility, James said. somewhere in Bishop's extensive properties, but it's not on any public record. Maybe we don't need records, Maya suggested. Maybe Echo knows where they are. Sarah and James turned to her in unison. Think about it, Maya continued. He keeps looking toward Bishop's property. What if he's not just looking? What if he's trying to tell us something? That's a stretch, James said doubtfully. Is it he found his way to this ranch to Grandma specifically? What if that wasn't random? Maya's eyes shone with the excitement of connecting dots. What if he was looking for someone who could understand someone with trauma like his own? The theory was fantastical, yet Sarah couldn't dismiss it. Not after what she just felt through Echo's touch. It's worth a try, she decided. Tonight we'll let him show us what he's been trying to tell us. Dust settled over the land like a soft blanket, stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. Sarah, Maya, and James stood at the edge of Horizon Ranch, Echo beside them, unrestrained by saddle or bridle. This is crazy, James muttered. You know that, right? Probably, Sarah agreed. But I'm fresh out of sane options. She turned to Echo, placing a hand on his neck. Show us, she said simply. Horse! Where are they? Echo snorted softly, then began walking toward the boundary fence that separated Horizon from Bishop's vast estate. He moved with purpose, not grazing or wandering, but following an invisible path only he could see. The three humans followed flashlights off to avoid detection, guided only by starlight and the pale shimmer of Echo's coat in the darkness. At the fence line, Echo stopped, looking back at Sarah as if waiting for permission. He wants to cross over, Maya whispered. Sarah hesitated. Trespassing on Bishop's land carried risks beyond legal trouble, but the need to understand, to uncover the truth, outweighed her caution. Let's go, she said, finding a spot where the barbed wire had slackened enough to slip through. They crossed into Bishop territory, Echo leading them along a barely visible trail that wound through a dense copse of trees. The night wrapped around them, crickets falling silent as they passed, as if the very land held its breath in anticipation. After 20 minutes of walking, Echo halted, ears pricked forward. Ahead, barely visible in the moonlight, stood a low concrete building, half hidden by scrub vegetation. No lights, no signs, no indication of its purpose, except for the faint sound of horses moving restlessly inside. What is this place? James whispered. Nothing that appears on any property records, Sarah replied, studying the windowless structure. Perfect for hiding something you don't want found. Echo pawed the ground, his body tense with anticipation or apprehension. Sarah placed a hand on his neck, feeling the rapid thrum of his pulse. You've been here before, she murmured. You escaped from here. A memory flashed through her mind, not her own, but vivid, nonetheless. Darkness, pain, the scent of antiseptic and fear. She snatched her hand away, gasping. What? Maya asked. Nothing, Sarah said, unwilling to voice the increasingly impossible reality taking shape in her mind. Let's get closer. They crept toward the building, staying low, using the sparse vegetation for cover. A single door marked the entrance, secured with an electronic keypad lock. No way in without the code, James said. There has to be a ventilation system, Sarah countered, scanning the building's exterior. No windows means they need air circulation, especially with horses inside. Maya pointed to a metal grill near the foundation. There. They moved to the vent, where Maya shone her phone's light through the slats. The beam revealed little, but a soft whinny from inside confirmed the presence of horses. Echo responded with a whinny of his own, 3 distinct notes, the same pattern Maya had described him using during Sarah's nightmares. From inside came an answer, 3 identical notes, then a 4th higher pitch. They know him, Maya breathed. They're communicating. Before Sarah could respond, floodlights suddenly bathed the area in harsh brightness. A siren wailed, and from somewhere nearby, voices shouted commands. Security system, James hissed. We need to run. Now! Sarah grabbed Echo's mane, ready to flee, but the horse stood immobile, eyes fixed on the building, every muscle trembling with what could only be described as determination. Echo, we have to go, she urged. He didn't budge. The sound of ATVs approached rapidly from the main property. In moments, they would be discovered. Sarah, we can't help them if we're arrested, James pleaded. We need to regroup. Come back with a plan. Finally, reluctantly, Echo allowed Sarah to lead him away. They fled through the trees, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter as they reached the boundary fence, and slipped back onto horizon land. Only when they stood in the safety of their own barn did they stop to catch their breath. "Now we know," Maya said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and excitement. "He was looking for the others. They're alive." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. "And Bishop is keeping them hidden. The question is why?" "Think about it," James said. "Horses with the ability to detect and influence human emotional states? The military applications were clear, but the private sector applications could be worth billions," Sarah finished. "Therapeutic animals for PTSD, anxiety, depression without the side effects of medication. Or the perfect tool for manipulation," Maya added quietly. "Imagine being able to influence someone's emotions without their knowledge. In the right hands, it could heal. In the wrong hands." The implications hung heavy in the air. Echo stood motionless in his stall, his gaze distant, as if still connected to the horses they'd left behind. Sarah approached him slowly, placing a tentative hand on his neck. "We'll get them out," she promised. "Somehow." Echo turned to look at her, and in his eyes Sarah saw something that transcended the barriers between species, a recognition, an understanding, a silent pact. Then without warning he reared back, eyes wild with sudden fear. Before Sarah could react, the sound of an engine approaching the ranch broke the night silence. "Someone's coming," James warned, peering out the barn door. Headlights swept across the yard as a black SUV pulled up to the house. Two men emerged, Bishop's security based on their uniforms and the logo on the vehicle. "Think they tracked us," Maya whispered. "Maybe," Sarah said. "Stay here." She strode out to meet the intruders, keeping her posture relaxed despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she called. "It's a bit late for social calls." Audrey, the taller of the two men, stepped forward. "Ms. McKenna, Mr. Bishop sends his regards and a message." "Oh, withdraw from the showcase by noon tomorrow or face consequences." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "That sounds suspiciously like a threat." "Not at all," the man replied smoothly. "Just friendly advice. Mr. Bishop also wanted us to deliver this." He handed her a folded document. In the dim light from the porch, Sarah could make out the heading, "Notice of Immediate Foreclosure." "The bank agreed to an extension," she said, anger flaring. "Mr. Bishop acquired your debt this afternoon. As the new lien holder, he's exercising his right to call in the loan immediately." The ground seemed to shift beneath Sarah's feet. "That's not legal." "I'm afraid it is. You have 72 hours to vacate the property." The men returned to their vehicle, mission accomplished. As they drove away, Sarah stood motionless, the paper clutched in her hand. James and Maya emerged from the barn, faces tight with concern. "What did they want?" Maya asked. Sarah handed her the notice. "Bishop's making his move. He's taking the ranch." "He can't do that." Maya's voice rose with indignation. "Apparently he can." Sarah's mind raced through options, finding none. "He's figured out we know about the horses, about Echo. He's eliminating the threat. Noddy, what do we do now?" Sarah looked toward the barn where Echo stood watching from the doorway, his silhouette a darker shadow against the night. "We move up our timeline," she said, a plan forming even as she spoke. "The showcase is in 3 days. Bishop expects us to either withdraw or spend that time fighting the foreclosure. Instead, we're going to use those 3 days to gather evidence and prepare for a very public revelation." "How?" James asked. "I need to make some calls," Sarah said. "Old contacts from my military days. People who might be interested in a private contractor misappropriating government property and conducting unauthorized experiments." "And Echo?" Maya's voice was small. Sarah met the horse's steady gaze. "Echo is going to help us finish what he started when he found his way to our creek that night. He's going to help us save the others." The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. Sarah called in favors from former military connections, sending what evidence they had about Project Sentinel to people who could act on it. James researched the layout of Bishop's compound, identifying possible locations for surveillance cameras and security personnel. Maya compiled all her observations of Echo into a comprehensive document, creating a record of his unusual abilities and behaviors. Through it all, Echo trained with a focused intensity that left no doubt about his understanding of what was at stake. On the morning before the showcase, Sarah woke to find Maya, already in the barn, camera in hand, recording Echo's movements with scientific precision. "He refused food last night," Maya reported, "and he's been making that sound again, the 3-note call." Echo paced his stall, his usual calm replaced by restless energy. When Sarah approached, he pressed his muzzle against her hand with unusual urgency. "He knows tomorrow is important," Sarah said. "It's more than that," Maya insisted. "I think he's trying to tell us something specific." As if in confirmation, Echo whinnied three distinct notes followed by a pause, then repeated, "See, that's not random." Maya played back a recording on her phone. "He's been doing this exact sequence every 20 minutes since midnight." Sarah listened to the pattern, something tugging at her memory. "It sounds almost like Morse code." James finished entering the barn behind them. Three short signals. SOS. Echo's ears pricked forward at James's words, his eyes focusing intently on the veterinarian. "That's impossible," Sarah said, but with less conviction than she might have had weeks ago. "He can't know Morse code." "Why not?" Maya challenged. "If he was part of a military program, if he was around soldiers and communications equipment, even if that were possible, why would he be signaling now?" Sarah asked. The answer came in the form of James's phone ringing. He answered, listened briefly, then paled. "What is it?" Sarah asked when he hung up. "My contact at Bishop's estate just called. There's activity at the concrete building, trucksmen in lab coats. They're moving the horses." Echo whinnied again, the same three-note pattern, more urgent now. "He knows," Maya whispered. "Somehow he knows they're in danger." Sarah didn't waste time questioning. If Echo was right, if the horses were being relocated, their chance to expose Bishop's operation might disappear. "We need to move now," she decided. "Not tomorrow at the showcase today." "How?" James asked. "Security will be even tighter with the transfer underway." Sarah turned to Echo, whose eyes held steady on hers. "We let Echo lead the way, again." They waited until dusk when the shadows lengthened and the likelihood of detection decreased. Sarah rode Echo bareback with only a simple hackamore for guidance. Maya and James followed in James's truck, keeping a discreet distance. Echo moved with purpose, avoiding the route they'd taken before, instead following a dry creek bed that wound along the property line. His ears constantly swiveled, alert to any sound, his muscles tense for immediate response. "He knows exactly where he's going," Sarah murmured, feeling the focused intent in every step Echo took. They emerged from the creek bed near a different section of Bishop's property, not the concrete building they'd found before, but a loading area where several horse trailers stood illuminated by floodlights. Men moved between the trailers in a temporary holding pen where dark shapes shifted nervously. Sarah dismounted, crouching low in the brush. Through binoculars, she could make out at least four horses, black like Echo, moving with the same alert watchfulness. "The sentinel horses," she whispered when Maya and James joined her. "They're all here." One horse in particular caught her attention, smaller than the others with a distinctive white marking on its chest. It moved with visible agitation, tossing its head and backing away from handlers who approached with sedation equipment. Echo trembled beside Sarah, his eyes fixed on the smaller horse. A soft nicker escaped him, not the three-note pattern, but something more primal, more visceral. "He knows that one," Maya said, watching through her own binoculars. "Look at how it's responding to the handlers. It's terrified." The smaller horse reared, suddenly striking out at a man who approached with a needle. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the panic in its movements. Not the fear of a wild animal, but the specific terror of a being reliving trauma. "They're going to sedate them for transport," James said. "Once they're moved, we'll lose our chance." Sarah weighed their options. Direct intervention was risky, they were outnumbered and outgunned if Bishop's security was armed, which seemed likely. But letting these animals disappear meant losing their evidence, their witnesses to Bishop's fraud. The decision was taken from her when Echo suddenly bolted, racing toward the loading area with a speed that left Sarah no chance to stop him. "Echo, no!" she called, but it was too late. His approach sent the men at the trailer scrambling. Echo thundered into the holding pen, scattering the handlers, making directly for the smaller horse. Their reunion was brief but unmistakable, muzzles touching a shared breath. Then chaos erupted. Security personnel converged on the pen, some with tranquilizer guns, others with more traditional weapons. Echo circled the smaller horse protectively, keeping himself between it and the approaching threat. "We have to help him," Maya cried, already moving forward. "Wait!" Sarah grabbed her arm. "We need a distraction." James pointed to his truck. "I can draw them off, give you time to open the pen." Sarah nodded. "Do it." Maya, stay with me. James sprinted back to his vehicle while Sarah and Maya crept closer to the loading area, using the confusion as cover. Within moments, James's truck roared to life, headlights blazing as he drove straight toward the trailer's horn blaring. As predicted, most of the security personnel turned their attention to this new threat, rushing to intercept the vehicle. Sarah seized the opportunity, running to the pen's gate with Maya close behind. The lock was simple, a slide bolt that yielded easily to Sarah's desperate strength. She flung the gate wide, calling to Echo. "Come on now!" Echo herded the smaller horse toward the open gate, but the other sentinel horses hesitated, conditioned by captivity or fear. "They won't come," Maya realized. "They're too afraid." Echo turned back, facing the remaining horses. He reared, striking the ground with his hooves once, twice, three times. The rhythm echoed in the night air, a command or plea that transcended human understanding. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then as one, the remaining horses surged forward, following Echo and the smaller horse through the gate. Sarah and Maya ran alongside them, guiding them toward the creek bed and the relative safety of darkness. Behind them, shouts and the sound of engines indicated pursuit was already organizing. They met James at a predetermined rendezvous point, his truck now bearing several dents from his diversion tactics. 5 horses, he counted, breathless with exertion and adrenaline. Including Echo. "We need to get them somewhere safe," Sarah said. "Bishop will have the entire county looking for them by morning." "I know a place," James offered. "My father's old hunting cabin. It's remote, has a small corral. Not ideal, but secluded." "Good enough," Sarah decided. "Let's move." As they prepared to leave, Echo approached the smaller horse again, nuzzling it gently. The interaction held such tenderness that Sarah felt like an intruder witnessing it. "They know each other," Maya said softly. "Really know each other?" Sarah nodded, a theory forming in her mind. The incident report mentioned a child. What if that smaller horse was paired with the child? What if they witnessed something together, something that created a bond? And Echo risked everything to save it, Maya finished. "Like he did tonight." In the distance, sirens wailed, drawing closer. "We need to go," James urged. "Now!" Sarah mounted Echo, who fell into position at the head of the small herd, leading them away from pursuit, away from captivity, into the uncertain freedom of the night. The cabin was exactly as James had described, remote, rustic, with a small corral that barely contained the 5 nervous horses. By the time they arrived, dawn was breaking over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of promise. Sarah watched as Echo moved among the others, calming them with his presence, establishing a hierarchy through subtle movements and sounds. The smaller horse, a mare they could now see, stayed close to him, her terror gradually subsiding under his care. "It's like he's talking to them," Maya observed, recording everything on her phone. "Maybe he is in his way," Sarah replied. James emerged from the cabin where he'd been making calls. "I've got journalists lined up to meet us at the showcase tomorrow," he reported. "And my military contact says they're sending investigators to look into Bishop's operation." "Will it be enough?" Maya asked. "Bishop has money connections." "He also has a warehouse full of cameras," Sarah reminded her. "Maya, check your footage from tonight. If we captured clear evidence of the horses of the security personnel—" Maya nodded, already reviewing the video she'd taken. "Got it. It's all here, the horses, the sedation equipment, even men with the Bishop logo on their uniforms." "Send copies to everyone on our contact list," Sarah instructed. "Insurance." As Maya worked, Sarah approached the corral. Echo greeted her with a soft nicker, his calm restored now that his mission was accomplished. The mare stayed back, still wary of humans, but the other 3 horses, 2 geldings and another mare, showed cautious interest. "What did they do to you?" Sarah murmured, noting the scars visible on 2 of them, the way they flinched at sudden movements. Echo pressed his muzzle against her hand, and again Sarah felt that strange connection, emotions not her own, flowing into her consciousness. Relief, determination, and an overwhelming sense of purpose not yet fulfilled. The showcase, when she realized. "You still want to go?" Echo's ears pricked forward at the word. "It's too dangerous," Sarah argued, feeling slightly ridiculous for reasoning with a horse, yet unable to dismiss the intelligence in his gaze. "Bishop will be watching for us now." Echo didn't back down, his focus unwavering. "What if he's right?" Maya said, joining them at the fence. "The showcase is the perfect platform. Everyone will be there, media community leaders, potential investors in Bishop's development. If we show up with all 5 horses with our evidence, we'd be walking into a trap, Sarah countered. Or springing our own, James suggested. What if that's exactly what Echo has been planning all along? Sarah looked from James to Maya to Echo, whose steady gaze held an almost human calculation. You're both crazy, she said finally. But then again, so am I for listening to a horse in the first place. She turned back to Echo, decision made. All right, we'll do it your way. The showcase. All of us. Echo nickered softly, approval perhaps, or gratitude. He turned to the other horses, moving among them with renewed purpose, as if preparing them for what was to come. Sarah watched a chill running down her spine as she realized that for all her planning, all her military training, and strategic thinking, she wasn't the one in charge of this mission. Echo was. And tomorrow at the Sovereign Estate's annual equestrian showcase, Alexander Bishop would face not just the horse he thought he'd eliminated, but the reckoning Echo had been orchestrating since the moment he found Sarah by that rain-swollen creek. The storm that had brought them together had been just the beginning. The real tempest was about to break. The morning of the showcase dawned clear and bright, the Texas sky an endless blue canvas stretched taut over rolling hills. At James's cabin, Sarah stood watching the 5 sentinel horses graze in the small corral, their dark coats gleaming in the early light. They had survived the night without detection, a small miracle given the resources Bishop undoubtedly had searching for them. Now came the true test, walking directly into the lion's den, deliberately confronting the man who had tried to bury their existence. Are we really doing this? Maya asked, joining Sarah at the fence. She looked both exhausted and exhilarated, dark circles beneath eyes bright with purpose. Apparently, Sarah replied, nodding toward Echo, who stood apart from the others facing the direction of Sovereign Estates, as if already plotting their approach. He seems to think so. James emerged from the cabin, phone in hand. Just got word from my contact at the showcase grounds. Bishop's increased security everywhere. ID checks at all entrances, private guards patrolling the perimeter. He's expecting us, Sarah said. More like terrified of us, Maya countered. He wouldn't go to these lengths if he wasn't afraid of what we know. Sarah studied the 5 horses. In daylight, their similarities were striking, all shared Echo's distinctive Akalteke conformation, though each bore different marks of their captivity. The smaller mare, whom Maya had nicknamed Whisper, still flinched at sudden movements. One of the geldings had a patch of white scarring along his hindquarters that spoke of less than gentle handling. They can't all make the journey to the showcase grounds, Sarah decided. It's too far, and some of them are in no condition for that kind of stress. James nodded in agreement. I can arrange transport for most of them. My truck and horse trailer will fit 3. Echo and Whisper should go with Sarah, Maya suggested. They're the most responsive, and Echo clearly wants to lead. Sarah turned to Echo, who had approached silently while they talked. In the morning light, his eyes reflected a depth of awareness that still unsettled her, even after weeks of witnessing his extraordinary intelligence. What's the plan, boy? She asked softly. What are we walking into? Echo snorted softly, pressing his muzzle against her shoulder in what felt like reassurance. Sarah placed her hand on his neck, and again came that strange sensation, emotions not her own flowing into her consciousness. This time she didn't resist it. Determination, clarity, a sense of ending and beginning intertwined. He knows exactly what he's doing, Sarah murmured, more to herself than the others. And what's that? James asked. Sarah met Echo's steady gaze. Finishing what he started when he found me by that creek. Whatever that was. They spent the morning preparing. James loaded 3 of the horses into his trailer, planning to circle around to a service entrance where a sympathetic employee would let them in. Sarah and Maya would approach on horseback, Sarah riding Echo, Maya on Whisper, taking a more direct route across Bishop's extensive property. Their timing had to be precise. The showcase's main event, where Alexander Bishop himself would present his prize thoroughbreds, was scheduled for noon. That was their target, the moment when all eyes, all cameras, would be on the central arena. As they prepared to leave, Sarah checked her phone one last time, confirming that their evidence had been distributed to multiple sources. Whatever happened today, Bishop's secrets would be exposed one way or another. Ready? She asked Maya, who had managed to fashion a simple bridle for Whisper from rope and leather scraps. The girl nodded, her face set in lines of determination that reminded Sarah powerfully of her mother. Ready. They mounted Sarah, settling onto Echo's bare back with the ease of growing familiarity. No saddle, no reins, just the hackamore to guide him if necessary, though she doubted it would be. Echo knew where they were going better than she did. See you at the showcase, James called, climbing into his truck. Good luck. Sarah and Maya exchanged a look, then turned their horses toward Sovereign Estates, toward a confrontation months or perhaps years in the making. Echo led them along hidden paths, avoiding main roads where Bishop's security might be watching. The smaller mare, Whisper, followed without hesitation, her trust in Echo evident in every step. Maya sat lightly on her back, allowing the horse to choose her own footing, respecting her nervous nature. They crossed streams, skirted dense thickets, and traversed open meadows with the caution of those who knew they were being hunted. Twice they froze at the sound of vehicles in the distance, but Echo's uncanny awareness of their surroundings kept them one step ahead of potential discovery. As they approached the outer boundaries of the showcase grounds, the sounds of the event reached them, announcements over loudspeakers, music, the distant murmur of crowds. Sarah felt Echo tense beneath her, his ears swiveling to catch every nuance of sound. How do we get in? Maya whispered, drawing Whisper alongside Echo. Security will be watching all the entrances. Sarah scanned the perimeter. High temporary fencing surrounded the showcase area, with guards posted at regular intervals. Beyond it, she could see the colorful flags and banners of the event, the gleaming white fences of the competition arenas. There, she decided, pointing to a section where the temporary fencing met a permanent stone wall. The cameras can't cover every angle. If we time it right between guard rotations. Echo didn't wait for her to finish. He moved forward with quiet determination, picking his way through the underbrush until they reached the point where fence met wall. Sarah tensed, watching a security guard walk the perimeter, past their position, and continue around a corner. Now, she breathed. Echo surged forward easily, clearing the fence in a smooth jump. Whisper hesitated, then followed her leap, less graceful but effective. They landed in a service area behind one of the larger stables, mercifully empty as staff and competitors focused on the ongoing events. We made it, Maya whispered, her voice tight with adrenaline and disbelief. That was the easy part, Sarah reminded her. Stay close. They dismounted, leading the horses through the back of the stable complex. Sarah had memorized the showcase layout from previous years, a central arena for the main events surrounded by smaller practice rings and exhibition areas, with stabling facilities radiating outward like spokes from a wheel. Bishop's presentation would take place in the central arena. That was where they needed to be. They worked their way inward, using service corridors and maintenance paths to avoid the main thoroughfares where they might be recognized. Echo moved with a strange combination of caution and confidence, as if he'd been here before and knew exactly which turns to take. Where's James? Maya asked as they neared the central complex. Sarah checked her watch. Should be in position by now. Her phone vibrated. A text from James. In place, South Service entrance. All horses secure. He made it, she told Maya. Now we just need to wait for the right moment. They found an unused tack room near the central arena and sequestered themselves inside. Through a small window, Sarah could see the gathering crowd, the judges' stand, and the elaborate setup for Bishop's presentation, a raised platform draped in Sovereign Estates blue and gold colors. 5 minutes, she told Maya, checking the schedule posted on the wall. Bishop goes on after the current demonstration. Echo stood quietly beside her, his focus seemingly turned inward, conserving energy for what was to come. Whisper pressed close to him, drawing comfort from his calm. Outside applause signaled the end of a performance. The announcer's voice boomed across the grounds. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. Please welcome our host and the owner of Sovereign Estates, Mr. Alexander Bishop. Sarah's phone vibrated again. Another text from James. Ready when you are. Now or never, she told Maya. They led Echo and Whisper through the tack room door, emerging into a service corridor that ran behind the central arena. At the end of the corridor, a gate opened directly onto the performance space, currently closed but unguarded. Sarah peered through a crack in the gate. Bishop stood on his platform, resplendent in an expensive suit, addressing the crowd with practiced charm. Behind him, handlers led his prized thoroughbreds into position, gleaming bay horses with braided manes and polished hooves. Sovereign Estates represents the pinnacle of equine excellence, Bishop was saying, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. Generations of careful breeding of selection for intelligence, athleticism, and beauty. Sarah turned to Maya. Wait for my signal. When I nod, open the gate. Maya positioned herself by the latch, ready to act. Sarah mounted Echo, feeling his muscles coil beneath her, sensing his readiness. In the arena, Bishop continued, our newest development, Sovereign Hills, will bring this same standard of excellence to residential living. We break ground next month on land that... Sarah caught Maya's eye and nodded. The gate swung open. Echo needed no urging. He stepped into the arena with the dignity of a king reclaiming his throne, Whisper following close behind. A collective gasp rose from the audience as the two black horses appeared, interrupting Bishop mid-sentence. For a moment, the only sound was the soft thud of hooves on sand as Echo walked directly toward the platform, where Bishop stood frozen, his confident smile replaced by shock. Sarah sat straight on Echo's back, her eyes locked on Bishop. She wore no riding attire, no show clothes, just worn jeans and a faded plaid shirt. Her gray hair, pulled back in a simple braid, caught the sunlight as Echo moved into the center of the arena. Bishop recovered first. Security, he snapped into his microphone. Remove this woman immediately. Guards started forward, but Echo's response stopped them in their tracks. He reared front hooves, pawing the air, a picture of controlled power rather than fear or aggression. When he returned to all fours, he faced Bishop with such focused intensity that even the security personnel hesitated. Sarah took advantage of the moment of uncertainty. Ladies and gentlemen, she called, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent arena. My name is Sarah McKenna, former combat medic, U.S. Army, and these horses have a story you need to hear. From the opposite side of the arena, James appeared, leading the three remaining sentinel horses. Like Echo and Whisper, they moved with a unified purpose, falling into formation around Sarah as if rehearsed. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Phones appeared, filming the unexpected interruption. Media personnel already present for the showcase turned their cameras toward the developing drama. This is absurd, Bishop sputtered. These people are trespassing. These animals are stolen property. Stolen! Sarah's voice cut through his protests. Like you stole them, Mr. Bishop. Like you reported them dead to collect insurance money while experimenting on them in secret. The crowd's murmurs turned to gasps. These 5 horses, Sarah continued, gesturing to the sentinels surrounding her, were part of a military research program called Project Sentinel. They were bred for enhanced empathic abilities to help soldiers with PTSD. When the program was shut down, they were entrusted to Mr. Bishop for proper care. She turned to face Bishop directly. Instead, he declared them dead, collected the insurance payout, and continued experimenting on them, privately planning to profit from their unique abilities. Lies, Bishop thundered. This woman is delusional. These are ordinary horses, nothing more. Echo chose that moment to demonstrate just how extraordinary he was. Without any visible cue from Sarah, he began to move in a complex pattern, executing movements that only the most highly trained dressage horses could perform, and he did it without saddle or bridle, responding solely to Sarah's subtle weight shifts. The other sentinels fell into formation around him, moving in synchronized patterns that showcased their unusual intelligence and training. The crowd watched in stunned silence, then burst into spontaneous applause. These are not ordinary horses, Sarah said when the applause died down. They were engineered to connect with humans on a neurological level, to sense emotions, to respond to trauma. They were created to heal, and they were nearly destroyed to hide the truth. Bishop's face had gone from red to pale. His eyes darted around the arena, seeking escape, finding none, as all attention focused on the confrontation playing out before hundreds of witnesses. You can't prove any of this, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Actually, we can. Maya stepped forward, holding up her phone. We have footage of your private research facility, of your men sedating these horses for transport last night, of documents linking you to Project Sentinel. As if on cue, several men in suits entered the arena from the main entrance. One flashed a badge. Alexander Bishop, Agent Davis, Department of Defense. We need to speak with you regarding allegations of fraud and misappropriation of government property. The crowd erupted in confused chatter. Bishop's security personnel looked to him for direction, but he stood paralyzed, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. In the chaotic moment that followed, something remarkable happened. Echo approached the platform where Bishop stood, stopping directly in front of him. The horse's eyes fixed on the man with an intensity that silenced the entire arena. Bishop took an involuntary step back. "Keep that animal away from me," he demanded, but his voice trembled. Echo didn't move. He simply stood watching, as if waiting for something. "He knows," Sarah said quietly, but in the hushed arena her words carried. "He remembers what you did, not just to him, but to all of them, to the child." At the word child, Bishop's composure shattered completely. "That was an accident," he blurted. "No one was supposed to get hurt. The girl, she wasn't authorized to be in the testing area." Echo's reaction was immediate. He reared again, this time with a cry that seemed to contain all the grief and rage of that long-ago moment. Whisper echoed his call, a higher, keening sound that raised goosebumps on every witness. "What happened?" Sarah pressed, sensing they were close to the full truth. "What happened to the child?" Bishop's shoulders slumped. "The final test. We were demonstrating the horse's response to simulated combat conditions. Flashbang smoked the works. The researcher's daughter, she'd been paired with Scent 11 for preliminary bonding tests. She snuck into the facility to see him." Echo pawed the ground, his attention never wavering from Bishop. "When the explosion started, she panicked, ran directly into the test area. This horse tried to reach her." Bishop's voice had taken on a hollow quality. There was an actual explosive device. Not supposed to be there. Someone's mistake. When it detonated, he couldn't finish. Didn't need to. The horror was written in every line of his body. "The project was shut down immediately," Bishop continued after a moment. "All evidence ordered destroyed. But the horses, they were too valuable, too unique. I thought I could continue the research, privately refine it. The applications would have been worth billions." Corinne, the girl, and Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer from the grief she felt emanating from Echo. "Didn't survive," Bishop said flatly. "Neither did her mother, the lead researcher. Heart attack 6 months later. Couldn't live with the loss." The arena was utterly silent now, hundreds of people bearing witness to a confession none had expected to hear. Echo made a soft sound, not a whinny or a nicker, but something lower, almost a hum. One by one, the other sentinels took up the sound, creating a harmonic vibration that seemed to resonate through the very ground. "What are they doing?" someone in the crowd whispered. Sarah felt it, then a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly unseated her. Not grief or rage as she might have expected, but something else entirely. Forgiveness. Release. The closing of a circle long left open. "They're letting go," she said, her voice breaking. "They're finishing what was started that day. Cherish." The sound continued for several heartbeats more, then faded. Echo lowered his head, exhaling deeply, as if a great weight had lifted from him. In the silence that followed, the DOD agent stepped forward to take Bishop into custody. He offered no resistance, his arrogance replaced by a hollow resignation. As they led him away, he glanced back once at Echo, a look that contained equal parts fear and grudging respect. The showcase officials, unsure how to proceed after such unprecedented events, called for a recess. The crowd dispersed slowly, many lingering, to watch the 5 black horses who had disrupted everything with their mere presence. Sarah dismounted, legs shaky with adrenaline and emotion. Maya rushed to embrace her, tears streaming down her young face. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "Echo did it," Sarah corrected gently, turning to the horse who had changed everything. "He planned this from the beginning, from the moment he found me." James joined them, his expression a mixture of awe and relief. "What happens now?" he asked. "To the horses, to Bishop." "Bishop will face charges," Sarah said. "Fraud at minimum, possibly more depending on what investigators find at his facility." "And them?" Maya nodded toward the 5 sentinels, who stood in a loose circle communicating in their silent way. Sarah watched them, understanding dawning. "They're free," she said simply. "For the first time in their lives, they're truly free." The aftermath unfolded more quickly than any of them could have anticipated. News of the dramatic confrontation at the Sovereign Estates showcase spread across media platforms within hours. By nightfall, the story of the Sentinel horses and Bishop's fraud had reached national outlets. The Department of Defense launched a formal investigation, seizing records from Bishop's private research facility and freezing his assets pending criminal charges. The revelation that government property had been misappropriated for private gain ensured that no influence or connection would shield him from consequences. Sarah, Maya, and James found themselves at the center of a storm of attention, interviewed by journalists, approached by documentary filmmakers, consulted by investigators. Through it all, they focused on one priority: the welfare of the 5 Sentinel horses. 3 days after the showcase, as the dust began to settle, a military transport arrived at Horizon Ranch, which in light of Bishop's fraud charges had been temporarily released from foreclosure proceedings. Officials from a specialized division of the Army Veterinary Corps came to evaluate the horses and determine their fate. "They're remarkable," the lead veterinarian told Sarah after examining all 5 Sentinels. "The program was terminated before we fully understood their capabilities, but these horses represent a breakthrough in interspecies neural connection." "What will happen to them?" Sarah asked, watching Echo graze peacefully in the pasture, the other Sentinels nearby. "Officially, they remain government property," the veterinarian admitted, "but given the circumstances and their unique bonding patterns, standard protocols don't apply." Meaning? "Meaning we're recommending they remain here under your supervision with regular monitoring by our department." The woman smiled slightly. "Consider it a joint research initiative, helping us understand their abilities while providing them the care they clearly need." Relief flooded through Sarah. "And the ranch? The frozen assets from Bishop's accounts will cover restitution to affected parties, including the invalidation of your foreclosure. The property is yours free and clear." It was more than Sarah had dared hope for. As the military personnel departed, promising to return with formal paperwork and arrangements, she stood at the fence watching the 5 horses who had upended her carefully isolated existence. Maya joined her notebook in hand as always. "They're staying," she said, not a question, but a statement of fact. "They're staying," Sarah confirmed. "I've been thinking," Maya began hesitantly, "about what you said at the showcase about the horses being created to heal. What if that's what we use the ranch for, a healing center for veterans with PTSD? Sarah glanced at her granddaughter, surprised by the suggestion, yet immediately seeing its potential. "That would be a significant undertaking. We have 5 empathically gifted horses, a ranch with plenty of space, and a decorated combat medic with first-hand experience of PTSD, Maya pointed out. "Plus, I've already drafted a business plan." She handed Sarah a folder filled with neatly organized papers: budget projections program, outlines potential funding sources. The thoroughness was impressive, especially from a teenager who until recently had barely engaged with the world around her. "When did you have time to do all this?" Sarah asked, flipping through the pages. Maya shrugged. "I don't sleep much either, not since Mom died." Suriname, the simple admission delivered without drama, hit Sarah with unexpected force. For all her focus on her own trauma, she had never fully acknowledged the depth of Maya's grief or her resilience. "We'll need help," Sarah said finally. "Staff funding, proper facilities." "Dr. Foster already said he'd volunteer his services," Maya replied, "and I've identified several grant programs specifically for veteran rehabilitation initiatives." Sarah studied her granddaughter's face, seeing in it echoes of her daughter, the same determination, the same quiet strength. "When did you become so grown up?" "Probably around the same time you started talking to horses," Maya replied with a small smile. Sarah laughed, surprising herself with the unfamiliar sound. "Fair enough." In the pasture, Echo lifted his head, ears pricked toward them, as if listening to their conversation. He nickered softly, then trotted toward the fence, the other sentinels following in loose formation. "I think they approve," Maya said, as Echo reached the fence and stretched his neck over it, muzzle extended toward Sarah. Sarah placed her hand on his forehead, no longer surprised by the wave of emotion that flowed between them, a calm certainty, a sense of rightness that went beyond words. "I think you're right," she agreed. 6 months later, Horizon Ranch had transformed. The weathered buildings were repaired and repainted. New facilities had been constructed, a covered arena for year-round work, additional stabling, comfortable accommodations for visitors. Signs at the entrance announced, "Horizon Healing Center, Equine Therapy for PTSD Recovery." Their first official program had begun with 3 veterans, all struggling with severe trauma, all resistant to traditional treatments. Each was paired with one of the sentinel horses for daily sessions with Sarah and a team of specialists guiding the interactions. The results exceeded even their hopeful projections. Within weeks, participants who had been unable to sleep through the night reported consecutive hours of rest. Those who had avoided public spaces began engaging in group activities. Flashbacks and panic attacks decreased in both frequency and intensity. Word spread through military communities, bringing more referrals than they could immediately accommodate. They developed a waiting list, then expanded their facilities to meet the growing need. On a clear autumn morning, Sarah stood watching their newest arrival, a young Marine who had lost both legs to an IED and hadn't spoken since returning home 3 months earlier. He sat in his wheelchair at the edge of the pasture, shoulders, hunched eyes fixed on the ground. Echo, who had developed a routine of evaluating each newcomer before they were paired with a horse, approached the fence line. He studied the young man for several minutes, then nickered softly the 3-note pattern that Sarah now recognized as his signature call. From the barn, Whisper emerged, responding to Echo's signal. She crossed the pasture slowly, deliberately, and stopped at the fence directly in front of the silent Marine. For long moments, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, the young man raised his head. His eyes met Whisper's. His hands, which had been clenched in his lap, slowly relaxed. Whisper reached her head over the fence, exhaling gently. The man lifted a trembling hand to her muzzle. "His name is Michael," Maya said quietly, joining Sarah as they observed the interaction. "Medical discharge 4 months ago. His mother says he hasn't touched anyone since coming home." Well. They watched as Michael's fingers made contact with Whisper's velvet nose. His expression didn't change, but tears began streaming down his face. Silent, cleansing tears that spoke of pain finally acknowledged. "That's how it starts," Sarah murmured. "That first connection." She knew it well, that moment when isolation cracked, when the protective shell built around trauma developed its first fissure. She had experienced it herself by a rain-swollen creek, when a wounded horse had recognized in her something that needed healing as badly as his own physical injuries. Echo moved to stand beside her, a warm presence against the autumn chill. He had transformed too, no longer the wary, haunted creature she'd found that stormy night, but a confident leader, purposeful in his new role. "You knew all along, didn't you?" she asked him quietly. "What we could build here." Echo turned his gaze to her eyes, reflecting a wisdom she had stopped questioning months ago. In them, Sarah saw not just intelligence, but a profound understanding of suffering and healing, a knowledge that transcended species and spoke directly to the broken places in human hearts. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the rejuvenated ranch, Sarah felt a peace she had thought forever lost to her. The ghosts still came sometimes, the memories, the guilt, the grief, but they no longer consumed her. They had become simply part of her story, not its entirety. In the pasture, Michael's hand remained on Whisper's muzzle, their connection deepening with each passing moment. His lips moved, not quite words yet, but an attempt, a beginning. Maya recorded the interaction with quiet precision, adding to the growing body of evidence, supporting what they had discovered, that healing often came not through words or medications, but through connections that bypassed language entirely. Soul speaking directly to soul across the boundaries that separated species. "I think we need to expand again," Maya said, reviewing her notes. "The waiting list is up to 32 veterans now." Sarah nodded. "We'll make it work." From nearby came the sound of hoofbeats, the other sentinels moving in synchronized patterns around the pasture, their daily exercise a dance of coordination that still drew observers from miles away. Echo watched them for a moment, then turned his attention back to Sarah. He pressed his muzzle against her scarred arm, the contact brief but intentional, a reminder of shared wounds and shared healing. "I know," Sarah said softly. "We've come a long way." In the east, the sun continued its ascent, casting its light across the land, illuminating not just what was, but what could be. Dawn breaking on a landscape forever changed by an extraordinary horse and the wounded veteran he had chosen to save. Echo lifted his head, gazing toward the horizon, as if seeing something beyond human perception. Perhaps he was. Perhaps he always had been. Sarah placed her hand on his neck, feeling the steady pulse of life beneath her fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. No one else would have heard Echo's response, a vibration too low for human ears, a connection too deep for scientific instruments to measure. But Sarah felt it resonating through her, being like the first notes of a song long forgotten, now remembered. The call of dawn, the promise of renewal, the healing power of a second soul walking beside your own, through the darkest night guiding you toward morning. They say the deepest wounds are the ones we cannot see, the invisible scars of trauma that reshape how we move through the world, how we trust, how we hope. Sarah McKenna came home from war carrying ghosts in her eyes. Echo carried the memory of a child lost in smoke and flame. Two souls shattered by circumstances beyond their control, each believing their brokenness was permanent. But healing isn't always about becoming who you were before. Sometimes it's about discovering who you can be after. About finding strength in the very places you were broken. The five sentinel horses continue their silent work at Horizon Ranch, guiding troubled souls back from darkness, with a wisdom that defies scientific explanation. Maya documents each miracle with the precision of a scientist and the wonder of a believer. And Sarah, she no longer startles at thunder, no longer fights sleep for fear of what dreams might come. The ghosts still visit sometimes, but they no longer own her. Perhaps the most profound connections are the ones that need no words. Perhaps true healing comes not when pain disappears, but when it transforms into purpose. What wounds do you carry in silence? What echoes linger in your quiet moments? Remember, sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply being seen, truly seen by eyes that recognize your pain and do not turn away. Dawn always follows the darkest night, always.